The Second Customer and the Amber Beads by Fergus Hume. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Second Customer and the Amber Beads. After the episode of the Florentine dagger, Hagar lost her high spirits. She had sent Eustace away to make his fortune and to discover, if possible, the lost heir of Jacob Dix. By this act of self-denial, as it really was, she had deprived herself of all pleasure. She had robbed herself of what might have been a bright future. Consequently, she was less cheerful than of yore. Nevertheless, she felt convinced that Lorne loved her, and that he would earn her gratitude, possibly her hand, by returning with Goliath at his heels. When that event took place, she would recover at once her spirits and her lover, but at present the business of the pawn shop took up her undivided attention, and forced her to put away sad thoughts and melancholy considerations. Also, Providence provided distraction for her dismal humors by sending her a negress to pawn a necklace of amber beads. Although Hagar did not know it at the time, this was the beginning of a second and rather more serious adventure. It was drawing to night, one August evening, when the woman made her appearance, and the atmosphere of the shop was darker than usual. Still, it was sufficiently light for Hagar to see that her customer was a tall and bulky negress, arrayed in a gaudy yellow dress, neutralized by trimmings of black jet beading. As the evening was hot and close, she wore neither cloak nor jacket, but displayed her somewhat shapeless figure to the full in this decidedly startling costume. Her hat was a garden of roses, red, white, and yellow, and she wore a large silver brooch like a shield, an extensive necklace of silver coins, and many bangles of the same metal on her black wrists. As a contrast to these splendors, she wore no gloves, nor did she hide her coal-black face with a veil. Altogether this odd customer was the blackest and most fantastically dressed negress that Hagar had ever seen, and in the dim light she looked a striking but rather alarming figure. On Hagar coming to the counter, this black woman produced out of a silver-clasped sealskin satchel a necklace, which she handed silently to Hagar for inspection. As the light was too imperfect to admit of a close examination, Hagar lighted the gas, but when it flamed up, the negress, as though unwilling to be seen too clearly in the searching glare, stepped back hastily into the darkness. Hagar put this retrograde movement down to the natural timidity of a person unaccustomed to pawning, and took but little notice of it at the time. Afterwards, she had cause to remember it. The necklace was a string of magnificent amber beads threaded on a slender chain of gold. Each bead was as large as the egg of a sparrow, and round the middle of each single one there was a narrow belt of tiny diamonds. The clasp at the back was of fine gold, square in shape, and curiously wrought to the representation of a hideous Ethiopian face with diamonds for eyes. This queer piece of jewelry was unique of its kind, and, as Hagar rapidly calculated, of considerable value. Nevertheless, she offered, according to custom, as low a sum as she well could. "I'll give £5 on it," she said, returning to the counter. Rather to her surprise, the negress accepted with a sharp nod, and then took out of her bag a scrap of paper. On this was written laboriously, "Rosa, Marylebone Road." The name and address were so imperfect that Hagar hesitated before making out the pawn ticket. "Have you no other name but Rosa?" she asked sharply. The negress shook her head and kept well in the shadow. And no more particular address than Marylebone Road? Again the black woman made a negative sign, whereat, annoyed by these gestures, Hagar grew angered. "Can't you speak?" she demanded tartly. "Are you dumb?" At once the negress nodded and laid a finger on her lips. Hagar drew back. This woman was black. She was dumb. She gave half a name, half an address, and she wished to pawn a valuable and unique piece of jewelry. The whole affair was queer, and, as Hagar considered, might be rather dangerous. Perhaps this silent negress was disposing of stolen goods, as the necklace seemed too fine for her to possess. For the moment Hagar was inclined to refuse to do business, but a glance at the amber beads decided her to make the bargain. She could get it cheap. She was acting well within the legal limits of business, and if the police did appear in the matter, no blame could be attached to her for the transaction. Biased by these considerations, Hagar made out the ticket in the name of Rosa, and took a clean, new 5-pound note out of the cash box. As she was about to give ticket and money across the counter, she paused. "I'll take the number of this note," she thought, going to the desk. "If this negress can't be traced by name or address, the banknote number will find her if it is necessary." Deeming this precaution judicious, Hagar hastily scribbled down the number of the 5-pound note, and returning to the counter, gave it and the ticket to her queer customer. The negress stretched out her right hand for them, and then Hagar made a discovery which she noted mentally as a mark of identification if necessary. However, she said nothing, but tried to get a good look at the woman's face. The customer, however, kept well in the shadow, and swept note and ticket into her bag hurriedly. Then she bowed and left the shop. 6 days later Hagar received a printed notice from New Scotland Yard, notifying to all pawnbrokers that the police were in search of a necklace of amber beads set with diamonds and clasped with a negro's face wrought in gold. Notice of its whereabouts was to be sent to the detective department without delay. Remembering her suspicions and recalling the persistent way in which the negress had averted her face, Hagar was not much surprised by this communication. Curious to know the truth and to learn what crime might be attached to the necklace, she wrote at once about the matter. Within 4 hours a stranger presented himself to see the amber beads, and to question her concerning the woman who had pawned the same. He was a fat little man, with a healthy red face and shrewd twinkling eyes. Introducing himself as Luke Horval of the detective service, he asked Hagar to relate the circumstances of the pawning. This the girl did frankly enough, but without communicating her own suspicions. At the conclusion of her narrative, she displayed the amber beads, which were carefully examined by Mr. Horval. Then he slapped his knee and whistled in a thoughtful sort of way. "I guessed as much," said he, staring hard at Hagar. "The negress did it." "Did what?" asked the girl curiously. "Why," said Horval, "murdered the old woman." Murder! The word had a gruesome and cruel sound which caused Hagar's cheek to pale when it rang in her ears. She had connected the amber beads with robbery, but scarcely with the taking of life. The idea that she had been in the company of a murderess gave Hagar a qualm. But suppressing this as a weakness, she asked Horval to tell her the details of the crime and how it bore on the pawning of the amber beads. "It's just this way, miss," explained the detective easily. "This Rosa is the nigger girl of Mrs. Arryford." "Is Rosa her real name?" "Oh, yes. I suppose she thought she might lose the beads if she gave a wrong one. But the address ain't right. It's the other end of London, as Mrs. Arryford lives. Or rather lived," added Horval, correcting himself, seeing she now occupies a Kensal Green grave. Campden Hill, miss. A sweet little house